and we've got lots of great content to cover with all of you today. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome. We are going to be presenting on candidate care best practices. This is from your Central HR Talent Acquisition team. We have most of the team, some of the team here, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lindsay Fouquet. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition and Classification. And then I'll turn it over to Shay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shay Edmonds, and I'm a Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant. And I'll send it over to Kenyari.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kenyari Jones. I'm also a Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant. I'll send it over to Sean.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sean McBride, and I am the Talent Acquisition Team Lead. And I'll pass it over to Tracy.
Hello, my name is Tracy Wells, and I'm a Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant.
Okay, now you got your facilitators on here. We are excited to be with you all today. We've got quite a bit of content, and we've got some interactive sections that we'll go through. We've got some good chat exercises. Love to get your feedback on those. We do have a polling question, so we've got some different areas for you all to be able to participate. Love to have questions, so if you do have those, feel free to pop those in the chat. If you want to come off mute to pose the question, we can certainly do that as well, but just trying to make this as beneficial for everyone as possible. I will also mention that we do have a resource that complements this training that is going to be coming out a little bit later this year. It's going to be the staff hiring guide. For the purpose of this training, we're very much going to be more focused on university staff and classified. However, a lot of the things that we're going to be going over can apply to your other employment types. I know that School of Medicine hires all employment types, and so many of these can also be used for your other employment types, but for these purposes, they'll mostly be on staff. And so we'll get into the objectives. So as far as the objectives, things that we're going to go through today is just being able to learn the importance of candidate care within the search process, just kind of being able to make a case around this. Being able to review statistics. I have some School of Medicine specific statistics for all employment types that we'll go through so you can kind of see the amount of recruitment that we have going on in School of Medicine. I know several of you have gotten to talk to, so we have lots of different recruitment going on across School of Medicine. We'll also be able to discover candidate care best practices throughout the search process. We've broken it into before the search, during the search, and after the search. And so we'll give you some good best practices for the different phases of the search process. And then really kind of plan how your department can take action. Maybe think through maybe one or two different things that you're going to get out of this training that you want to try to apply with the department that you're supporting when it comes to the hiring process. And so just really kind of thinking through what is it that you want to apply. I mean, there's going to be lots of great things to think through, so you'll have lots of different things that you could potentially do, but what are two things that you want to try to use to implement? So first, we're going to start with really defining like what is candidate care. I know some people may be familiar with the term candidate care. It's definitely something that has taken place a lot more recently as we've seen larger applicant pools, or even when you've seen smaller applicant pools, just trying to really think about the candidate care experience. And so we're going to get into defining what is candidate care. So when we were taking a look at the definition of candidate care, there's different definitions out there, but the one that we felt kind of really made a difference in and how we wanted to define it was the one that we settled on that's on the slide. So generally refers to the strategies and actions taken by a hiring department to ensure that job candidates are treated with respect, transparency, and professionalism throughout the hiring journey. And so this can include timely communications. I know communications becomes like a huge part when it comes to the hiring process. And so those communications can be so important when you're trying to attract applicants or even continue to make sure that they are still interested in the job opportunity. Being able to make sure that we're respecting their time and effort. There's a lot of jobs out there in the marketplace. And so candidates do have a lot of opportunity to apply in different places. And so just making sure that we're respecting their time, really creating a welcoming environment. I would say a lot of times from a branding perspective, this can sometimes be the first time that they might be interacting with the University of Colorado Anschutz. And so just making sure that we're creating that positive experience is going to be important as we go through that. Some people may have interacted with CU Anschutz as a patient perspective, but from an employment perspective, that can be a little bit different. And then just making sure that we're able to provide feedback. Sometimes feedback, we'll get asked for feedback. Sometimes we're not able to provide so much feedback, but really thinking through that. And so the goal of this training is to really think through some of the different things that you could do within those different phases of the search process and some of the best practices that we've compiled from research or from our collective experience when it comes to the search process. So that leads us to our first chat exercise that we have. So whenever I've got the speech bubble on here, we'll have the chat exercise. So feel free to pop these into the chat. But why do you think candidate care is important in the hiring process? What do you all think? Angela says, shows a culture of respecting someone's time and energy. Love that. Retaining good talent. First impressions are important. You know, that's a great point on there, Peggy. First impressions are very important when it comes to the hiring piece. Let's see, we've got sets positive impression, respect. May lose a good candidate if you don't provide good candidate care. That's very real. And I'm sure there's actually several of you that probably have experienced that where it's like, it's your top person and then they all of a sudden leave, and that's never a good feeling. It's no fun knowing where you are. Yes, it is no fun knowing not knowing where you're at in the process. Sets a tone for great experience. It's probably the most human part of human resources. Ooh, I like that. It's the most human part for the external customer. Strong recruitment and workplace image encourages candidates sharing postings with friends. I like that. You can be able to encourage others to apply if you create a great experience. Keeps the candidate interested in the position, reinforces our reputation as a great employer. So they know they're actively being considered and didn't fall into a black hole. Yes, we don't want them, Betsy. We don't want them to feel like they fell into a black hole, which sometimes that can happen. That can very much happen where it feels like no one's paying attention. And that doesn't really create a positive experience when somebody's putting that time and energy with creating all their materials that they're submitting for the job. So we'll go through some of those different things, but it looks like we've got some great feedback on there. Thank you so much for that. So first, you all know me from presenting. I do love some data. So we wanted to take a look at some data when it comes to School of Medicine. So I pulled these metrics. These are from all employment types within School of Medicine. These were pulled from out of Taleo as far as like positions. So you'll see in this one, this is your applicant to recruitment volume. And so the gold line is going to represent the number of recruitments. And then you can also see from the bottom from the years 2021 through 2024. You can see the volume on it. And then down at the bottom is actually the representation of the actual numbers themselves. And then the black line on here is going to be the volume of applicants that have applied to the position. Now, one thing I will mention though with the applicant piece is that those numbers, if somebody applies to multiple positions within that year, it only counts them once. So we do have some frequent appliers. So they are not counted multiple times in these numbers. These are individual numbers for the applicants. And so you can see that we have gone up significantly when it comes to recruitment postings within the School of Medicine. It's dipped down a little bit, but that's not uncommon. We typically had seen a lot more recruitments spike up when it came to 2021. Because if you think back to COVID, during 2020, a lot of places weren't able to do hiring. 2021 is when you kind of had the hiring spike, where lots of people were opening up positions at that point. And then a lot of them tapered off, but you can see that we've continued growing and that there's been some additional positions that have been added. And it's tapering down a little bit. That's not a bad thing to have it taper down just a little bit when it comes to the requisition volume. Now you can see on the bright side that the applicant volume continues to trend upward, which is actually something that we've been actively trying to make sure that we're getting our positions out there. Over the past couple of years, we've added some different recruitment sites that we've been able to post our positions at. We've been going to a lot more community events to go to job fairs to make sure to get our name out there as far as branding. And then there's just been a lot more marketing around positions in general. And so we've seen an influx of applicants. But then I also know that within the marketplace right now, you probably all have seen that as HR people, that there have been a lot of layoffs and different things that have happened in the marketplace. So there are a lot more applicants in the marketplace than there have traditionally been due to some of the layoffs that are happening in the marketplace. So that is when it comes to the recruitment metrics and applicant volume, kind of get an idea around that. The next one, I always like to look at this metric. I always find it fascinating. This is the applicant pool to recruitment ratio. So this takes your annual number of recruitments divided by your annual number of applicants. So you get an average number of how many people are normally per recruitment. I'm not saying that you're always going to have 21 applicants for every recruitment. However, as far as averages go, we're continuing to trend upwards as far as having more applicants that are applying for positions. And so I know when I've spoken with several of you that are on here, they've talked about how there's been more applicants, more application traffic. Some of you have gotten way more than you probably wanted to have for applicant traffic. I know a couple of you have had 300 plus applicants in some pools, but you can see that we're continuing to trend upward, which is a nice thing to see. Now, when we talk about candidate care, I wanted to go through a couple of metrics that really kind of hit home some of the ideas and actually some of the things that you all have contributed in the chat over here. So making a case for candidate care. One of the things that I like to talk about with candidate care is thinking about it as a customer experience. All of you on here have been a customer at some point where you've gone into a store, purchased goods, services, things like that. And like thinking about a candidate, like an actual customer experience. And so I really like people to think about it as a customer experience when it comes to the hiring piece of it. And so some of the statistics that we have around this, and I think this really kind of helps illustrate a picture around why it's so important, is if you are a dissatisfied customer, how many of you, I'm sure there's several of you on here that have been dissatisfied sometimes with something that maybe you purchased or service or something like that. If you don't like the service, you're dissatisfied, on average, they say you tell 9 to 15 people if it was not a good experience. So let's think back to some of those metrics that we just saw as far as the recruitment process, how many applications that we're getting, how many of those for like people that are applying to positions and the requisitions. If you think that maybe one person has a poor experience that they tell 9 to 15 people, that doesn't make it very likely that they would want to apply to a position that we had on our campus. And so really thinking about it as your word of mouth advertising becomes so important when it comes to that. And so if you do have a positive experience, and this came from Zendesk, a customer service study, it says it leads to about 42% are willing to come back. And so I will say that sometimes the person that we're considering for a position may not be the successful candidate. They may not be the person that ends up getting selected. But if you create a really positive experience for them, they will tell that to other individuals. And then they'd say, you know what, I had a great experience at Anschutz. I would very much be interested and open to opportunities should those arise. And so really kind of fostering that culture and that environment really helps with recruitment in the future. So like jobs that you may not even have out right now will benefit for those future applicants. But really just trying to create that positive experience because those negative ones can impact the ability to recruit. The other thing that we also do is we do manage the Glassdoor page for the campus, for Anschutz campus. And so a lot of times we'll get reviews from some of our current or previous employees on there, and we respond to all of them. They all get read, they all get reviewed. And I will also say that they also all get read by senior leadership. Some of those reviews actually get sent up to cabinet level. And so those reviews are actually very important to us. And so we end up responding to those reviews, but it also gives us some insight into what the employee experience is. And we also know that a lot of times when somebody's considering applying for a job opportunity, they'll do research as far as the company to see like what's going on, how the employees feel about it. And Glassdoor is one of those. And so if you ever want to get out there and see like what's being said about Anschutz, the Glassdoor account is a great way to kind of see how that's being done. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Shay, who's going to start talking about some of the before parts of candidate care.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so just starting off with this process flow, a lot of you may have seen this before, but this is just the beginning of the search, which a lot of people may say, what does a candidate have to do with the beginning of a search? And I have this analogy that I kind of like visualize in my own mind when I think about it, but it's like making dinner for a group. So if you start out in a bad spot where you don't have all the ingredients, you don't have the help you need, you don't have a timeline when people are supposed to arrive, then things really start to go awry. And I think about it like with my kids, if I tell them to be there at 6, and I'm still getting the groceries at 6, well, they're going to go off and they're going to eat somewhere else because they're tired of waiting for me. And the same is true for a candidate. So if we can tighten any of these spaces and really, put the trust in us for those candidates, they're really going to follow through and have a less stressful application process and really move forward. There are several of these process flows out there, and they can all be found on our HR website. But this is just the beginning. So some of you may be familiar with this, others it may be new, but it really is a great opportunity for us to get started, to tighten all those processes, to make the candidate's experience much more seamless and just a better experience all the way around. One thing I like to think about between these processes is candidates most of the time are kind of in an urgent situation to get hired, whether it's because they're in a job they don't like, or maybe they're in a financial spot where they need to get a job, whatever the case may be. If we can tighten this timeline and make it easier for us, but ultimately easier for the candidate, that's really a good opportunity for us. So with that, like I said, that this process is on the HR website, so you can definitely find more out there if you're looking for the whole process flow. So let's go ahead and move over to the next slide. So in this slide, it's the actual description, not to be confused with the postings. So the postings come later, and that's where we're going to add why they should work for the university and all that good stuff. But this is really the basics of why this job is even being posted. And it starts with the job summary. So this really is to hook the candidate into, like, why is this important for me to apply for this job? Do I have the experience or the desire to be in this position? And it really is giving them all the details of the position. And this creates like a warm, clear teaser for them to come in and understand what this position is all about, what the day-to-day details look like, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, we have the functions and the tasks. So doing interviews, a lot of times, a lot of people say, what are the day-to-day, details of this job look like? And a lot of times it was never added to the summary, which it should be, because that's the most important piece, is like, is this something that I'm really going to want? I'll give you an example. My daughter just graduated from the University of Wyoming. I know Wyoming, I don't know why. I guess she wanted a larger bill since we get a discount. But anyway, she just graduated. So she's in the job search, and she just interviewed at a company last week where she was applying for an administration job. And it turned out that it was actually a sales job. But in the summary, it just said some interaction with potential clients, which isn't necessarily, it could be sales, or it could be, some sort of customer service role. You don't really know. But this is really like where between the summary and the daily tasks, it really breaks down what this job is doing and what to expect. And obviously, as a candidate, if you're going in and you have a very clear indication of what you're expected to be doing and what the job entails, it's going to be a much better experience for you, especially when you get into the interview process and there's no surprises as we go through. So then there's the working title, and this sounds so intuitive, like, yeah, no kidding, put the correct working title out there. But a lot of times you'll see maybe like a manager role or a program manager, and maybe it's not specifically indicating that you may be supervising somebody, or maybe you're not supervising somebody. But whether you're going to click on that or not, it's going to indicate like whether you have the experience to actually go after that role anyway. So we really want to put that up there as like the first introduction to not just the university, but the first introduction to the job, and supply that first impression to the potential candidate on what they can expect. And the more precise we can be here, whether it has, the job level or maybe even the location, the more precise we can be, the better the candidate's going to feel as they go through the process, and that they're going to have more confidence in our competence in how we're posting this. So it really is a good place to start. And then the job responsibilities. Again, this kind of goes into the tasks and the function of the job, but it really does define the success that the candidates can have. So if they see something in there that doesn't fit well with their desire or maybe their experience, Maybe they don't want to be here, or maybe they do want to if everything lines up. And I'll give you an example here. I actually recently, in the last few months, had a position open where the summary didn't outline that there was some data filing that was or data entry that was part of the job duties. Well, when I was going through the interview with the candidates, one of them actually said, "Oh, data entry bores me to death. I don't want that." So right away, we had somebody who was totally qualified for the job, but if they would have seen that initially, they wouldn't have taken the time to apply, which we want them to apply, but we also want good candidates that are going to be retainable once they get into those positions. So it's just something to think about as we go through the responsibilities and really define what the responsibilities of the job are. Are you supervising somebody? Is there data entry that's part of it? And really outline all the duties of the job, so the candidates have a clear understanding of what to expect. And then the work location, of course, this is a big one, which, a lot of people commute, but I'll go back to my daughter on this one. So one of the jobs that she recently applied for, she lives in Wyoming, so she was looking for remote work, and she went into the interview, and it turned out that the job wasn't remote, it was hybrid, which is kind of remote, but not exactly. So ultimately, she had to let the job go, which was a negative experience for her. But ultimately, it wastes the hiring team's time as well. So it's a negative for everybody involved. So really just being clear, where the location is, whether it's, Colorado Springs, Cherry Creek, Park Meadows, that way they can decide for themselves if their life conditions are able to, make that job happen. And then going on down, qualifications. This is a tricky one and an obvious one. So when we're establishing the qualifications, obviously we want the most qualified applicants we can get, but we don't want to limit the candidates that we're getting by making the minimum qualifications more of a preferred qualification. So when we're doing the minimum qualifications, we really want to stick to the minimum qualifications and not add added details, because that's going to limit our talent pool. And not only that, for somebody who may be almost able to apply for this job, it's reducing our diversity in our talent pool and the qualifications. So we might be losing good people that way. And a lot of people will drop out. And that's, again, it's negative for the candidates, because they're trying to get in, especially in the entry level, trying to get in with the minimum qualifications. And if they're not quite there, even if it's something that maybe isn't a minimum qualification, but it's listed, that's something we want to be aware of. So it's really critical. And then moving down just a little bit further there, we're talking about the posting contacts. This also seems like a given, but a lot of times we have people apply to jobs where the hiring manager may be working with patients or something of that nature. Maybe they're on vacation during this interview process, so they're not able to interact with any questions that come up. So it really is like sitting down with the team, the hiring committee, and figuring out who's able to take any engagements from potential applicants if something comes up. So it's really being prepared on the front side, and that way it tightens all those gaps that we just spoke about, but also allows for a better candidate experience, because if they do have questions, they have a resource to contact and somebody who's actually going to reply. It's just not going to go into the void. With that said, working with the hiring committee to create deadlines. Now, again, this comes back to tightening up all the gaps in that initial process flow. So if we can understand, when do you want the job posted? When do you want the job taken down? And when are interviews going to start? And when are interviews going to finish? And hopefully hire to be made. If we can tighten all those, it really makes for a better candidate experience. Because if you think about your own experience, I know I've been in situations where I need a job. So yes, I want a job that I want, but also the financial side of life is helping me like make an urgent request to get that job. So if we can eliminate some of those hurdles of bringing good talent in and having them stay retained throughout the entire process, that's great. But it starts with understanding what the deadlines are. And again, communicating that with the committee so that everybody is aware of what those deadlines are and when to be available and when they can continue with their own work. And then again, the salary. That's what 99% of us are here for. So really understanding what the salary requirements are for the job. We put those in our postings so that the candidates are aware, but we want to make sure that the candidates understand what the salary is. Because I've had many interviews where I go in, and even though we list the salary range on our descriptions and in our postings, they've either applied at so many jobs that they've forgotten or they're not aware of it. And it can be, great for some people or a deal breaker for others. But in the end, if they're not expecting that salary, then it's a negative for those candidates. So again, the more clarity we can build into this process, the better we can be. So slide 3 here. So going into this, like, what does this mean? Again, we're in the beginning of the search. So this really does provide an opportunity for us to understand the scope with the committee, and so that everybody is understanding what it's going to take and what we're doing here, and what service level we should be expecting if we're going to bring in the talent acquisition team. So really understanding, like, is this a local job? Is it part-time? Is it full-time? How urgently do we need this position? Those are all valuable things to understand with this request, because a lot of times we need somebody right away. So if the committee is not aware of it, then we may have people who aren't available for interviews or things of that nature. So really understanding this piece of it and really define that. And again, this comes back to the candidates, because if we know what we're doing, then we're going to be able to explain to the candidates as they go through the process what to expect, what the timelines are, and who to contact if they have questions. All of these things are very critical as we go through this. And it's all part of the scope of the hire. With that, the visa, of course, a lot of our jobs don't have visa sponsorship, but several do. So let's put that into the description so candidates understand, like, if you're looking for a visa, this is a great position to apply for, and possibly this could be yours. So this is just another thing to understand and put it out there. The more visually responsible we are, the more clarity the candidates have. Again, with the search team and the timeline, I've already kind of spoken to this, but the tighter we can close that window, the better the experience is for the candidates. They understand what to expect, when the posting is going to be taken down, when, in the interview process, we can give them accurate information as to when the next interviews will be and when the final decision is hopefully to be made. But it gives them a timeline on what they can expect, which really builds their confidence, and maybe they'll hold out to come on to the university, even if they're not sure what's going to happen. So again, close the gaps with your talent acquisition team. If you need our support, if you're having us do the resume reviews or the initial interviews, or even we're going all the way through the process, the sooner you can ask us or request that help and let us know that what you're expecting of that, the more we can help you close some of those gaps in the process. So it really is a great opportunity to get us involved and also to let us know how we can help you. And slide 4 here. So again, these are the best practices. A lot of them have already been spoken, but really, like, ultimately, these are the ones you want to really pay attention to. We use a template when we post our jobs, so a lot of the details of the job, like as far as what the hiring conditions are, things of that nature, that we're an equitable employer, things of those are built in. But we do want people, the candidates, to have the confidence in us to see the same thing over and over. So many candidates may apply to several different positions. And if those positions look different, just based strictly on a template, it's going to lessen their confidence in the fact that we know what we're doing. And honestly, departments do things very, very differently often, and that can be confusing. So we really want you to use the template, stick to it, and obviously fill it out as fully as you can. There is limitations to characters, so just be aware of that, but also just to make sure that we're consistent in the way we're delivering our jobs. Obviously, title accuracy, that's huge, because title really equals the promise of a future for a potential candidate, and that's a big one. So we want to have them react positively in that nature. Align the qualifications. I kind of mentioned that the minimum quals, make sure they are the minimum, but we don't want to drop below the minimum, but we don't want to start adding on to that. That causes complexity and also takes away from the talent pool. And that can impact the candidates. Maybe they're thinking they're qualified and they're not once they get to the qualifications. And again, the preferred qualifications, keep them as, like this is what I must have and this is what I would like to have. So really being clear on that aspect of it. The employment conditions, that's pretty much built into the template, but if there is any special conditions built into the position you have, make sure that there's no surprises for those candidates. There's nothing, I guess there is things that are worse, but it's very disappointing for a candidate to get into the interview process and find out that there's something that disqualifies them, or maybe it doesn't fit with their life conditions, whatever it is. So the less surprises we can, have in the process, the better off we'll be. And deadlines, of course, we already spoke to that. The tighter we can make the deadlines, the better retention we'll have as far as good candidates. And that gives them confidence too, that we know what we're doing and we're moving through the process quickly and efficiently. So the tighter we can make those windows, the better. And so slide 5, going on to the internal applications. This is great for retention and loyalty for our current employees. A lot of employees are obviously here to move up and be fulfilled and find purpose in what they're doing. But a lot of times the internal notifications go unnoticed, or maybe they don't even know they're out there. So when you have an internal opportunity, it's best to tell your team, the department, whoever you need to have to apply to these jobs, and give them the link that they need to get there, and maybe a step-by-step process on how to get there. Because I know a lot of people don't understand that it's not the external website. It's actually an internal site, and some people follow it, some people don't. So the more we can communicate, the bigger the talent pool will be, the more fulfillment we'll find with our candidates, and the happier that they'll see that they actually are eligible for a possible opportunity. And invite everybody. It's really the way we can show that we want to retain our employees and we're loyal to them. So it's really a great way to go. Again, the process, if you can share the link, that's terrific. And then if anybody has any questions, you can definitely reach out to the hr.recruitment@cuanschutz.com for any questions, and we can tell you where the posting is and where the status of that posting is at. So the more support, again, the better off we'll be. And going on to the next chat.
And before we go to the next one on here, I will just mention that if you do elect to do an internal only posting for CU Careers, the link doesn't work on those. And I know some of you have experienced that before. For whatever reason, the internal site, the link doesn't go to it. So if you elect to do an internal only posting, when you get the posted email from the HR specialist on our team, they will include the step-by-step instructions that you can share with the hiring manager or the department to be able to share with the employees on it, because that's the only way that we're able to access the site, since they have to log in with their EID. And so if you run into questions on it, as Shay mentioned, if you reach out to the hr.recruiting email, if you reach out to your talent acquisition consultant, we can certainly get those instructions for you. Or we can even have the individual reach out to our team and we can help walk them through how to get to that site as well. Okay. Shay mentioned we're ready for a chat exercise. This is going to be a question, all of you, if you want to put your responses in the chat. Some of you may have been recent job seekers and you can speak to that experience, but maybe some of you have just gotten to witness some of the hiring practices in your department and maybe have some thoughts on this as well. But what is one thing that you wish you had known before participating in the hiring process, either as a candidate or a hiring manager? What's something that you wish that you had known before that you didn't know? How slow the process takes. Yeah, the process can take some time. That is definitely true. Salary negotiation skills as a candidate. I think that's a great one. We actually have some salary negotiation pieces a little bit later, which is nice. Clear job duties, clear job duties, that always makes it a little bit easier for people to know if they're qualified or not qualified, or if they actually want to do those job duties. Let's see. Agatha said timelines as a candidate. I think those are always great to be able to share those timelines, to be able to be as transparent as we can be. Sometimes we can't foresee some of the barriers as we're going through the hiring process, but most of the time we can try to get that moving. Growth opportunities, love that. all the steps in the hiring process. There are a lot of steps. We do have a lot of steps, and you all can tell because the process workflows that we have on our site. There's a lot of steps. Difference between preferred quals and KSAs. Oh, I love that one. Yeah, that one. And I feel like sometimes it's just like that line gets blurred between preferred qualifications versus the KSAs. Limitations on salary. I will say, as somebody that's been recruiting for quite a long time, you can definitely tell the people that have not been in the public sector because they think they can negotiate a whole bunch more. It's like, no, what we advertise is what we can pay. Let's see the stages as well. Let's see limitation on salary. Limitations. Often candidates ask how many people are in the interview. I was surprised if you're only expect one and walk into the interview with 4 or 5 people. Yeah, that can also be something. Now, these are all great thoughts on here. Recruitment incentive opportunities. I think that's another good one to point out. That is a great tool that we can leverage if we're a little bit away from what they're trying to get from salary. So we've got some great ones that we have on here. Thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kenyari.
All right, thank you, Lindsay and Shay. So here we have another visual overview of what the search committee process should look like at this stage during the search. Of course, we're going to start by generating a pool of applicants through sourcing and outreach. And once you have enough applicants, we're going to start our screening or application review process. Obviously, only a select few candidates will move forward. So you should keep everybody informed of their status throughout the search rather than waiting until the very end, because we don't want to waste anybody's time. Once you've selected candidates for further consideration, you should also have a list of interview questions ready to go. And HR or search committee interviews should be used to narrow down the list of candidates that you'll eventually refer to the hiring authority. And yeah, all of our flow charts can be found on the central HR website for both classified staff and university staff. Can we go to the next slide, Lindsay? All right, candidate experience is crucial to CU's reputation as an employer. So frequent communication and transparency with candidates can go a long way. As the employer, you've obviously got a little bit of leverage in this process, but as Lindsay said earlier, we also have plenty of competition. There are tons of jobs these folks could have applied to, yet they chose to take their chances with CU. So just remember that the application and interview process is a two-way street. Candidates are also evaluating us to make sure we're a good fit for them and their career goals. All applicants must be given full consideration and should be treated with the same respect, regardless of how far they go in the process. And the search committee should also designate someone to be the posting contact, preferably someone who's going to be available to answer questions from candidates in a timely manner. We do include a section in our job ad to let folks know who to reach out to for any questions they have about their application. Some departments prefer to use a service account as their posting contact, which is fine, as long as it's not like a dummy account and there's actually someone responding to emails as they come in. And with that being said, don't just rely on email either, because just in the AI era where everything seems to be increasingly automated, just hearing a voice on the other end of the phone can be reassuring to candidates by letting them know that an actual human being is overseeing the application review process. Next slide, please. Just a few more tips for communicating with candidates. So once you have a group of candidates under consideration, be sure to establish a clear deadline. Let them know when interviews will start and when the search committee expects to make a final hiring decision. It obviously depends on the size of your applicant pool, but generally it's a good practice to start interviews 1 week after the posting deadline. You should also try to update candidates on the next steps or their status within 1 week of each interview. As soon as you know that a candidate won't be moving forward, you should let them know immediately. Again, we don't want to waste anybody's time. And yeah, if you eliminate someone, it shouldn't take 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get back to them and let them know. So just make sure you're sending, also make sure you're sending the not selected emails and updating each candidate status in CU Careers as you go. Next slide, please. So when you move into interviews, you should already have some questions prepared and carefully crafted to focus on the qualifications and the duties of the position. Try to avoid the brain teaser type questions, and believe it or not, we have seen some of these kind of weird questions like, how many windows does the Empire State Building have? Like, who cares? I'm sure that's a fun fact, but questions that have no direct correlation to the job are not encouraged and will probably just irritate the candidate, which is not something you want to do, especially if they're a top contender. Position-focused questions not only keep the search committee focused on what really matters, but they also paint a clear picture for the candidate of the expectations of the position. Scenario-based questions can be a good strategy, though. I know the university police department, for example, and honestly, several other departments on campus use these as a good strategy. They're a good way to get an idea of how candidates have handled certain situations in the past, maybe what they learned from those experiences, and how they might respond to similar situations in the future. We've had some departments ask about sharing questions, the interview questions in advance, and it's not really common to do that. The only time it makes sense to me is if you're going to be sharing a generic overview of topics that might be discussed, or maybe it's some type of ADA accommodation. But otherwise, I believe sharing the exact questions ahead of time kind of defeats the purpose of an interview. They're probably just going to plug the questions into ChatGPT and read the answers off to me. And personally, I find that to be a waste of time. And we also have a guide with some sample interview questions broken down by topic, which includes a section that covers illegal questions that you should not be asking during the interview, which can just be a great resource if the search committee is kind of stuck and aren't sure where to start with their questions. Next slide, please. So yeah, as Shay said earlier, probably the most important piece of the application process for candidates is salary. Candidates know how much they need to earn to support their lifestyle, so you need to be honest and upfront about it in the very beginning. In the state of Colorado, we are required by law to post salary ranges in our job ads, so candidates should also be doing their part to become aware of the salary range before applying. But in case they don't read the full description, or in the event of any confusion, this is something that should be brought up during the initial interviews. Now, you cannot and should not inquire about their salary history or current salary, but you should make your starting salary range clear and just see where the conversation goes from there. CU is not always able to match or compete with industry standards, but when it comes to benefits, that's usually where CU has the advantage. So as a recruiting strategy, I always recommend discussing our benefits and sharing our total compensation calculator with top candidates. There have been plenty of times where I'm interviewing a candidate who's kind of on the fence due to the salary, and I'll just say, although we can't offer you this base salary, maybe we're approved for a recruitment incentive, or here's how much vacation time you get, here's how many sick days you get, have you seen our retirement plan? And I'm not saying this is going to win over every candidate, but in my experience, discussing total compensation has definitely helped me keep the attention of candidates who are kind of on the fence. And with that, we can go to the next slide. I'm going to send it over to Sean, and it looks like we have a few questions down there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, there was just one question here. Great question, Trish. It's on our site, but I'm actually sent Deanna a copy of our slides along with some of the resources we're referencing that she can send out after we do the presentation. So don't worry, we will get you the materials.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lindsay and Kenyari. So I'm going to pick up now and talk a bit about the application review process. So overall, this is at the stage where we've collected all of those resumes, cover letters, everything, and now it's time to actually review them and see who's qualified, figure out who we're going to invite to interviews. So ultimately, it's really good for all of us to keep in mind as HR professionals. It's good for us to remind our hiring managers and search committees that the review process needs to be, the screening process should be legally defensible, equitable, and fair at all stages. So what do we mean by that? That we should really be assessing all applicants against the exact same standards. We shouldn't, cherry pick individual candidates and assess them on different standards. We want to try to avoid allowing any biases to come in and influence our decisions at any stage. So it's important to keep that in mind. Remind your hiring managers and committee members, everything we do, we need to be equitable, fair, and legally defensible. If we ever did get claims of bias or we ended up in a courtroom someday to defend our actions, we want to make sure that we're able to do so legally. So the actual review process, as I'm sure you all know, many of you are probably reviewing resumes, cover letters, and conducting interviews just like we are. We go through a sequential review process. We're starting with everybody who applies, and then we're narrowing it down at every step until we have a more manageable pool, and eventually before we hire that one person. So we, at each stage of the sequential review, we're going to be eliminating candidates and narrowing down the applicant pool. As Lindsay mentioned earlier, we're going to soon be releasing a staff hiring guide, which will go into each of these steps of the sequential review in more detail, but I'll just mention some of them briefly now. So again, we're starting with everybody that applied, and we're first going to see, are their applications complete or not? So did we ask for, or did they submit all of the required application materials? Are we asking for a resume, cover letter, and list of references from everybody? Well, what about the people who don't write a cover letter? Are they eliminated or are they not? So keep in mind, that's the first part. Is this application complete or not? Was it received by our deadline or our full consideration date? And then from there, speaking to what Shay was mentioning earlier, the scope of the search. Then we're going to look at that. Is this an internal only search? Should we only be looking at current CU employees? Or is this an external search? If it's external, are we really only looking at candidates in the local or state? Are we looking nationwide, or are we fully international search? Is visa sponsorship actually available? So that's the next stage in the sequential review. Which of these applicants fall within the geographic scope? From there, we can look at the conditions of employment. Some positions have long, lengthy lists. These are oftentimes physical hazards or travel expectations, things like that. But we need to see, are candidates willing and or able to meet all of the conditions of employment? So that's another way, another step in the sequential review where some candidates will be eliminated. If they're not willing and able to travel X number of days per week, but that is required of the job, then those candidates can be eliminated. And then we can also use pre-screening questions as well. So there's a generic, we can write pre-screening questions about specific conditions of employment, or we have a general one that says, are you willing and able to meet all of the conditions as listed in the posting? So that can be a quick way for candidates to, self-select out if they're not willing to. We can see on a quick pre-screening question, if they answer no, then we can eliminate them and move on. From there, the next stage is then to look at all of those applicants who met the first few steps, and then to see who meets the minimum qualifications. So this is a yes or no assessment. Candidates either meet the qualifications or they don't. So all of the candidates who do meet the minimum can be considered and or interviewed, but anyone who does not meet the minimum cannot be considered and should not be interviewed. So it's really important to know we don't want to get all the way down through multiple rounds of interviews and then all of a sudden we realize, oh, this person's actually short of the years of experience. We can't hire this person. We should have never interviewed them. We really want to try to avoid those situations. So making sure that everyone either meets the qualifications or not is really important, and only inviting those who do meet the minimum to come to interview for the position. Now, a lot of times, though, we might, especially nowadays, we're getting more and more applications, more and more submissions per posting as the job market shifts. So we may have lots of people that meet the minimum qualifications, and that's a good thing. We typically advise casting a wide net, having the minimum qualifications, of course, in line with CU standards for equity and fairness, but not too high of a bar to eliminate so many people initially. You want to give yourself maximum flexibility, but you might have 50 or 100 candidates that all meet the minimum, and it's not administratively possible to interview 50 candidates or even 25. So what you can do next in the sequential review is to all of those candidates who met the minimum, now assess them against the preferred qualifications. These are, as we mentioned earlier, these would be nice to haves, not required to do the job on day one, but people who do have these are more qualified on paper, at least. So you can use these preferred qualifications to narrow the field further, identify on paper who are the most qualified candidates, and that can really help you decide whom to invite to interviews. And then the next steps are doing the interviews and then, of course, the final hiring decision. So those are the sequential review steps that we anticipate every search going through. And that could take a long time, could be a very short process, depending on how your qualifications are written, how many applications you actually received. So it may look a little bit different depending on the actual situation. Now, we also mentioned that, as Kenyari said, and we'll reiterate a number of times, that we want to notify candidates as soon as possible once a decision has been made. So that's whether they're moving forward to the next round of interviews or they've been eliminated and are no longer in consideration. We want to notify those candidates yes or no as soon as possible. Again, as I'll reiterate again, this shows respect to each individual and their time. As somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, we don't want to be that black hole organization where people apply and they never hear anything. And I'm sure we've all heard, maybe even heard CU referred to as a black hole organization at times. We really want to actively combat that. And how we can do that is by quickly notifying people respectfully, yes or no, so they can either move on with their day and choose to apply to other positions, or they can prepare themselves for that next round. Because even if you are excited about a candidate, if you wait too long to let them know they're moving to the next round, they may get soured on us. And of course, keep in mind, your top candidates are going to be the first ones to go because they're going to be also probably interviewing with other organizations at the same time. So the best candidates are going to be gone first, all the more important to be timely in your communications. So just a quick show of hands. Has anybody here personally experienced long delays after applying or interviewing for a job, either here at CU or elsewhere? I see a few on our team, a few others. Virtual hands or in the chat. My hand is up because I've experienced that as well. I think it's happened probably to some of us here at CU. I know certainly other organizations I've worked at as well. And just a quick anecdote, I remember the first time I moved to Colorado way back in 2007, I was a recent graduate, wanted to do the ski bum lifestyle for a while. So I went to a job fair in New York City to interview for ski resorts. Vail Resorts was there. 4 of their different resorts were there interviewing candidates. I interviewed with 3 different resorts. One of them got back to me very quickly, scheduled a second round. And before I knew it, I was driving out to Beaver Creek for my first job, my first HR job ever as a recent graduate at Beaver Creek Ski Resort up in Eagle County. But I also interviewed with 2 other of Vail's resorts. One of those resorts never replied to me after my interview. And the third one waited about a month and a half to contact me to see if I wanted to do a second interview. But I had already accepted and started the job at their sister university, or excuse me, their sister resort. So yeah, Breckenridge had reached out to me, hey, are you still interested? And I had to say, nope, I'm already working at Beaver Creek. So this happens from time to time, and we can combat this. We can by being timely in our communications. And I always encourage all of us as HR professionals to help impart this onto our search committees and the hiring managers. Really put yourselves in the shoes of the applicants. For some of us, we may have been looking and been a job seeker recently, and this is all very raw to us still, but a lot of the search committee members, hiring managers we work with, maybe it's been a very long time since they were a job seeker themselves. Maybe they've not remembered how frustrating it can be to be an applicant and not hear back quickly enough, to not feel like your time is being respected. So I always encourage us as HR professionals, impart upon our search committees and our hiring managers, remember what it was like when you were looking for a job and how frustrating and challenging and difficult it was. And let's try to make it easier for the applicants coming through now. It'll be better for our reputation, better for the candidate's individual experience. And ultimately, you're probably going to be able to hire higher quality candidates because the top candidates, as I mentioned, are the first to go to other opportunities. So think back to when you were a job seeker, what felt good and what did not feel good in that process. And let's focus on the things that did feel good. So next slide, please. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about internal and referred candidates. We mentioned, Shay mentioned this earlier. I just want to reiterate a few more pieces of information. Of course, internal candidates are extremely important to CU. We do want to invest and develop our internal community. Even if someone is leaving our department, we would love for them to stay at CU. And we've had a lot of people in our team go out to the college and schools after working in central HR. And we look at that as a very wonderful thing. Somebody staying within our community, we're not losing all of that institutional knowledge. It's just going to another part of the organization. So we really do strongly encourage, internal candidates to be considered. However, they still must at least be minimally qualified. We've had this happen before where, some candidates, internal or even external, might be recommended, they might be referred or encouraged to apply. But if they don't meet those minimum qualifications, they still cannot be considered, should not be interviewed. So just because somebody's internal or just because, the director of your program referred this friend of a family member does not mean that they have to be given preferential treatment. So we're trying not to give preferential treatment. We really want to, again, avoid biases influencing our decisions. We want our search process to still be fair, equitable, and legally defensible. Now, where you can give preferential treatment to internal candidates is if you actually have internal experience listed as one of the preferred qualifications. That might be one of the things that we list, internal knowledge or experience within the CU system or experience within this particular department, laboratory, school, college. You can certainly use those as a preferred qualification, and then anybody who does have those get those additional points. So that's the only time you can really use it, is if it's listed in the posting as a preferred qualification. Not selected email notifications, as Kenyari mentioned, we want to send these as soon as possible at each stage. So I'm going to reiterate that again. We want to respect the individuals and their time by letting them know, no, we're not going to move forward with you. And we want to do that as soon as possible so they're not left wondering and things are dragging on and on for weeks. Now with internal candidates and referred candidates, even if they're not qualified, or maybe they made it to the first round, but they're not going to make it to the second round, it is still a really good idea to give a personal phone call or a more individualized email to that individual. Oftentimes what we'll do is, have a conversation. We appreciate that you applied. We really value internal candidates. You interviewed well. However, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. And then, of course, we still send the generic email so that we have written communication. But with internal candidates, we don't want them to feel discouraged from applying to other opportunities. We want them to know that their time was valued with us. So it can go a long way to just, give that internal candidate a little more information, maybe a quick phone call, and then so they're not just getting the generic email that anyone else might. I'll pause for a second there. Was there any questions in the chat or comments?
Sorry, that was me, Sean. I was just letting the group know that, if the search committee ever has like a large applicant volume and they're having trouble keeping up with everybody, they can definitely notify their TAC to help out with dispositioning folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for letting them know that. We absolutely can do that. We are here to help. I'm also seeing someone mentioning that there was a time they got declined for a position at CU 8 months after they applied. Yeah, that's not good. That's the kind of thing we want to avoid happening. Honestly, getting a rejection notice 8 months later, that might be worse than not getting a notice at all, neither of which we want to do. So more often than not, try to send those not selected notices sooner than later. I've also had some hiring managers express, well, we don't want to eliminate those people because what if our top candidate doesn't pick the job? We want to be able to go back to them. Well, you can still go back to the candidates, even if you've let them know they've not been selected. And honestly, that's better than like, well, we got to wait until they decide. Then we got to give that person a few days. And then we got to get the offer letter. So it might be a week. It might be 2 weeks. And you've got these other runners up that are great, just dangling in the wind. And we don't want that to be the case. It's better to say, you're not selected, we're moving forward with other candidates, and then to go back to them later if you need to. That has happened. I mean, it happens in our unit. I've done it when I was a hiring manager. If the person really wants the job, they're not going to care that they were the second or third choice. They're going to still want that job. So better to be honest, direct, respect their time, and then come back to them and be honest. Hey, you know, things have changed. We've reopened the search and we're now looking to consider you again. That's a much better message than not hearing anything for weeks and weeks and weeks. All right, next slide, please. All right, so when to take down the posting, this comes up quite often. So we have two main options, basically, to have a hard deadline for the posting or to have a full consideration date. So a hard deadline would be, we post the position, it's posted for 2 weeks, and on this particular day, the posting will come down. We can set the system to automatically come down on whatever day that you want. So our best practice that we recommend is to use a hard deadline. Take the posting down while you're reviewing your applicants. We can always repost it if necessary. So reposting it a day later, 2 weeks later, after we've realized, oh, this applicant pool isn't strong enough, or everybody withdrew, then you can always repost and get more applicants. So that's what we would always recommend as the best practice. Have a hard deadline, have that posting come down while you're reviewing applicants. If your applicant pool is strong enough to move to interviews, great, then you don't need to repost. Or maybe you'll have to repost, you know, a month later if all of those candidates fall through, but that's better than having it open, continually collecting submissions that will in most cases never be looked at. We can see applicant volume drop after those, you know, after a full consideration date posts. Candidates understand, oh, this was posted 6 months ago. Why would I even bother applying? So the number of applicants you're going to get by doing that is small. The quality of candidates is probably not as high if you're just continually collecting submissions while you're already interviewing other candidates. It's not a good practice. We want to avoid that. But if you're not up for a hard deadline, the next best option is to at least have a full consideration date. So the posting will be up through, you know, well, the posting will be up until interviews begin. However, full consideration will be given to those received within the first 2 weeks. So then you can still collect applications after that initial 2 weeks, but you still want to take that posting down once you move into interviews. Any questions about deadlines? I know some hiring managers really, it's like a security blanket. They just want to see all these applications in there. It gives them comfort to know there's hundreds of people in there. But if you're never going to look at them, it's damaging our reputation for people to just spend all this time drafting, specialized materials, and then we're never going to look at them. That contributes to the reputation of being a black hole type organization. All right. And then, yes, the posting should come down, as I said, once you're moving into interviews. Not good to continually accept them. We can always repost it. We can always repost it. That's not a problem. It's better to take it down and repost than to just have it open and candidates never knowing if and when their resume will ever be looked at. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we've done the initial reviews. Now we're going to be selecting candidates to interview. So I'm going to reiterate a number of items that we mentioned earlier. So we're going through that sequential review process. Does everybody have the required materials? If you're going to eliminate some candidates for not writing a cover letter, you need to eliminate all candidates for not writing a cover letter. And I've had that happen where sometimes, ooh, we really wanted this person to apply, and they do, but they didn't write a cover letter. Well, you just rejected 20 other people for not writing a cover letter. You need to reject that person for not writing a cover letter as well. So this goes back to what I said earlier, treating everybody and assessing everybody against the exact same standards and not cherry picking individual candidates to go through a softer review process. We do sometimes get the questions about, do we have to interview all candidates that meet the minimum qualifications? And the answer is no. Anybody that you do interview has to meet the minimum, but you do not have to interview everybody that meets the minimum. To the generic example I gave earlier, you might have 50 people that met the minimum, and that is not administratively feasible to interview 50 people. So what you want to do is, okay, we've got 50 who met the minimum. Let's narrow the field down further. Using the preferred qualifications is usually the easiest way to do that. So maybe we have 4 preferred qualifications, and out of those 50, maybe only 7 meet all of the preferred. Well, great. Then you've got 7 candidates that are most qualified on paper. It's a great group of candidates to start with. So if somebody met the minimum, but they only met 1 or 2 of the preferred qualifications, then they might be eliminated because others have met more of those qualifications. And that's, again, part of that sequential review process that we want to go through. And of course, the scope, considering can you sponsor visas or not? Do these candidates, are they willing and able to meet the conditions of employment, like travel or environmental hazards or laboratory hazards or whatever it may be? All right, so that is next slide, please. All right, so now we're going into actually scheduling and then conducting the interviews. So at this point, you should be able to refer back to your original plan. Typically, at the very beginning, there's usually the search committee meeting. We oftentimes refer to as a charge meeting, where you're laying out what the expectations are. How many rounds of interviews are we going to have? What are the format of the interviews? Are we doing phone interviews first and then in person? Are we doing virtual interviews all the way and only inviting finalists to in-person interviews? So consider what your original plan was from that charge meeting, but know that you may need to adjust based on the size and strength of the applicant pool. So you may anticipate, well, we're going to have 3 rounds of interviews, phone interviews, virtual, and then in person, and we're going to have lots of search committee members involved. But then you get that applicant pool and, oh, there's only really 6 candidates that we feel strong enough to interview. Well, maybe you don't need to do 3 rounds of interviews. So maybe you can shorten that time period based on the strength of that applicant pool. So have that original plan in place and try to stick to that. But you should also adjust to be reasonable. If you only have 2 or 3 candidates, you don't probably need 3 rounds of interviews. You can probably just do 1 or 2 rounds of interviews, speed up the process for everybody involved. And when you do have that plan in place and you're about to invite those candidates, share that timeline with them. As we mentioned earlier, and I'll reiterate again, it's really good for candidates to know they're going to ask you anyway. When are you going to wrap up first round interviews? When do you expect for me to hear about the next round? If you proactively share them, here's our timeline. We're doing first round interviews Monday through Thursday. Committee is going to meet on Friday. And then early next week, you're going to hear from us, yes or no. Candidates that can eliminate some of their anxiety, that'll eliminate some of the questions that they may have had for you. So you can be proactive and share that anticipated timeline with candidates before the interviews start, and then keeping them informed throughout the process if things need to move. As far as search committees, availability is really important. We recommend at the beginning, all right, you've been assigned to be on this search committee. You need to start thinking about when are these interviews going to be, and everybody on that committee needs to block off time on their calendars. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten to that stage and it's like, all right, we've got great candidates. We know who we want to interview. Oh, well, this person's out on vacation this week. And, oh, well, they've got a conference tomorrow, so we can't do interviews that day. And this is all stuff you should have thought about in advance. Your committee members should have blocked off time weeks ago and in preparation for these interviews. So encourage your search committee members, your hiring managers, be realistic about your own commitments. Can you actually serve on this committee? Can you fully commit to it? We don't want to drag on the interviews needlessly. So let's get our time blocked off on our calendars in advance. But also be flexible as well. We need to be flexible. The candidates should also be a bit flexible as well. We recommend offering multiple options to be able to accommodate candidates' different schedules. So maybe they're working a current job where they can't easily take quick breaks, and it'd be easier for them to do late afternoon or early morning interviews. So it's great when we can offer, hey, we're going to be doing interviews on Tuesday and Thursday. We've got slots available in the mornings and in the afternoons, just so that we give candidates, we can try to accommodate their different schedules as well. But of course, that needs to be within reason. We don't want to let candidates drag out the process longer than necessary. It's totally fine to tell candidates, I'm sorry that you're on vacation this week, but we have a timeline and we need to finish our first interviews this week. So if you're not able to participate this week, I'm sorry, but we'll have to move on with other candidates. Better to let them know that. So be flexible, offer different opportunities, but be reasonable as well. Don't put yourself and your hiring committee in a tough spot by waiting for one particular candidate. That also kind of relates to rescheduling interviews, or if a candidate misses an interview. Some committee members, hiring managers, get really upset if a candidate reaches out and says, oh, you know what, I know we're scheduled for tomorrow, but something's come up and I can't meet that. Can we schedule for a different day or time? I understand that can be frustrating, but we're all individuals with lives as well. I've interviewed candidates who literally got in car accident right before their interview, and that was a legitimate reason for them to not be able to make that phone interview or whatever it was. So, be reasonable. If you can reschedule, great. But if you can't and the timeline needs to move on, that's okay as well. You don't want to unnecessarily prolong your timeline, but you do want to show candidates that you're willing to be flexible and that you are understanding of their very real life circumstances that might prevent them from being able to make a particular day or time. And also really important is be warm, friendly, and welcoming during the interview process. I've interviewed for positions where, somebody mentioned earlier, you think you're meeting with one person. I walked into an interview and it was a 5-person panel interview. Nobody told me about that in advance. It was not very welcoming and it didn't put me at ease at all. And, maybe some environments are high pressure situations that you want to test some of that. But honestly, in most cases, you want every candidate to be able to present themselves in the best way possible. Also for our reputation, it's just nice to be warm, friendly, welcoming to any candidates that we're inviting onto campus or into our day for a virtual interview. And remember that these candidates are interviewing and assessing us as well. A lot of hiring managers and search committee members, I think, lose sight of this. Again, maybe it's those ones who haven't been in the job market themselves in a long time. But you need to remember these candidates are trying to pick where they're going to spend a lot of their time. Do they want to spend it with somebody, a hiring manager or a committee or a department that isn't nice, that isn't kind to them, that isn't understanding? So remember that these candidates are interviewing us just as much as we are interviewing them. So it's a two-way street. It's important to remind and reiterate that to people. And then the last item is just to also always make sure you have time during your interviews at the end for candidates to ask questions. It can be tough to estimate. Some candidates are long-winded. I know I talk a lot when I'm being interviewed. Sometimes they can get off the rails, but it's good for one of those committee members to keep an eye on the clock. Make sure you've got at least a few minutes at the end so you don't rush and, oh, we've got another interview. Sorry, you can email us questions later. Not a great experience. Honor their time. Spend some extra minutes with them. Don't, schedule your interviews back to back. Give yourself a 15-minute, 30-minute buffer in between interviews so that there can be some overflow. All right, and that's last for this slide. Next, we have another chat exercise. So keeping in mind all that Kenyari and I and the rest of us just shared, we're curious to hear from you. If you imagine back to when you were a candidate, waiting to hear back after you interviewed, what would have made you feel valued during that waiting period? Or if you did have a good experience in your past, what did make you feel valued while you were waiting to find out if you're going to move on to the next round or if you're going to be offered the position or not? Feel free to enter in the chat or come off mute if you've got any thoughts.
So it looks like we've got up there updated emails, any form of communication. Oscar's like, I'll take any form. Yeah, I think communication is definitely key. Communication, what is the process? Communication, follow-up, status, timeline. I like that. Where you're at in the process, what's the timeline? Email updates, even if brief. I know it's just sometimes it's just like we've seen your application's in here. We're working through some of those things. Like it's just a quick reminder, just so people know that you are still being reviewed.
Yeah, they're great examples. Little things. And yes, I know we've got hundreds of applicants and we've all got lots of busy jobs and lots of important responsibilities, but taking a few minutes to just send a quick email letting people know, hey, we're still in consideration, the committee's been delayed for whatever reason, or, don't worry, we're going to get back to you on Tuesday. Any quick little message will allow people to feel more valued. They'll feel like they haven't been lost. Because a lot of people, if they don't hear anything, they assume they've been eliminated. And that might not be the case. You just might be delayed in letting people know what's happening next. And again, your best candidates are going to be the first to withdraw if, other organizations they're interviewing with and they're having a quicker, more efficient process. So yeah, keep all of those things in mind. Again, put yourself in the shoes of the committee, of the applicants. What would make you feel valued along the way? And as a lot of you have mentioned, quick little updates go a long way.
I'll go through a couple more of these. We've got some good ones on here. It says a timeline with next steps. As Sean mentioned, they're going to ask about that. So just knowing like what that timeline is going to be. a call or email from the chair, committee, contact, and update. It is nice. Like we were mentioning earlier, sometimes just that touch of like a personal email or a phone call really goes a long way. I have one that says, I would like to hear, frankly, sooner if I wasn't being considered or if it closed and that they were pivoting. Yeah, things like that. Like if the search got canceled, just those general notifications on it. I know sometimes it can feel a little bit like I don't want to have to tell them this, but it's often better to go ahead and tell them that they're no longer being considered, and that opens them up for other opportunities that they might be pursuing at the same time. Timeline of when to expect to hear something, confirmation that you'll hear something either way, even if it's not moving forward. Yes, I like
Yeah.
that. Just being
That's
able to
something
be
that I
transparent.
always focus on as well. When I'm interviewing candidates, I'm doing first round and then handing off to a committee for, second or final rounds. Even in the first round interview, I tell all of them at the end, you will hear from me by X date. In the next 48 hours or 24 hours or by Tuesday, you will hear from me. And then that's making myself a commitment to those individuals. And it does go a long way. I can't tell you how many people have thanked me, even when they've been eliminated. Thank you, I appreciate you letting me know. Or when I have called candidates to say, hey, you know what, there's a little bit of a delay. They're usually surprised. Oh my God, I can't believe somebody actually called me. Thank you so much. Like these little things go so far to ingratiate ourselves to individuals. And even when they're not selected, they might say, wow, well, at least they treated me with respect. And you know what? I'm going to go back to CU Careers website and look for other opportunities now. All right.
Okay. We
Next,
are
I'll
going
turn it over to Tracy.
Okay, let me make sure. Okay, so let's close up this search, right? Here's another visual overview of the process of after the search. These overviews can be helpful if you're a new BP and don't know where to start and you're closing out your search and you're hiring. As Shay mentioned earlier, these are found on our website. And if you don't know where to find them, you can reach out to your TAC and we can help you find them and navigate the website to find them. I know sometimes our website has a lot of information, so just reach out to us if it's something you can't clearly find. You're going to start with checking your reference checks. Next, you'll do your pre-offer salary equity approvals, your verbal offer and negotiation. This step can take some time if the person does not agree with the compensation that has come back. So just remember that this process can take a week or two to complete. Background check and offer letter review, and search closeout and hire completion. You can go to the next one, Lindsay. How to disposition, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm gonna pull up an additional page if you want to start it up.
Yeah, how to disposition and notify your candidates. We actually already have a candidate care guide with a step-by-step procedure that Lindsay has attached here. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah. If you go to our central page and you go to your HR business partners in the search section, it is under, I know we have a lot of resources, as Tracy mentioned on it. If you go down to candidate care guide, this is the guide that she is referring to on here.
Yeah, that's it.
And this actually has a lot of step-by-step pieces. This is a great resource if you are a new HR business partner, or maybe you're an HR business partner that doesn't handle a lot of hiring all the time, because it actually walks you through how you can access things in Taleo, which is our CU Careers. And it's got step-by-step instructions about how you can go through and navigate it. And so it's a great resource if you're ever trying to get additional information on how to navigate the site. Thanks, Malia.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Now put it back to the presentation.
Okay, so how to disposition and notify your candidates. Once again, it's in that guide, but I know we keep saying this, but it is so important to disposition and notify your candidates at this stage. I actually have a person who reached out to me yesterday. They interviewed for a position and they still have not heard anything back. This was like January. And I didn't know what to say to them because I didn't do the interviews. So it's just not okay. And we basically are the black hole to them now because they were not happy when they emailed me. So just remember, keep moving them through the hiring step as you hire and as you interview, and then let them know when they have not been selected. Like Sean said, we can always reach back out to them and tell them that, okay, now you are selected. I'm sure no one will mind if they really wanted the job. You can go to the next box, Lindsay. Reference checks. Reference checks must be completed on every candidate, external or internal, prior to an offer being extended. Please remember that if the reference check has not come back, please wait for that before you move forward with your hiring process. Make sure the candidate knows and is aware of their references are going to be contacted prior to the reference check process beginning. This will help move this along a lot faster if they're looking for the emails that will come from the system for their references. You can move forward. Background checks. Same as reference checks, this needs to be completed prior to the employment of the candidate. The University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus performs background checks, has a condition of employment and appointment. Please ensure the finalists are aware of the background check process so they can also look from emails from HireRight. So this can also keep the process moving. Sometimes people aren't aware of the emails they're going to receive and they just get lost in their emails and they're not aware that their background check is ready to be performed or they got the information back on it. Next box. Salary negotiations. I think someone brought this up earlier about salary negotiations. This should be talked about early and often to ensure the candidate's salary expectations matches what we can offer to them. Once we get an approval for compensation, we can give a verbal offer and the salary negotiation can start. A lot of times, a candidate wants a higher salary, so we can always go back to compensation to see if this is possible. But once again, this does take time. It can take 3 to 4 days as compensation is backed up and there's only one person right now. She needs a little time to review these sort of things. Best practices is to provide a reasonable timeline for all of this to take place, usually 48 to 72 hours if possible, and give the candidate time to review their negotiations and their new salary offer if applicable. And next step. Sign-on bonuses and recruitment incentives. These may be utilized as a negotiating or recruitment tool, depending on the budget of your department. A sign-on bonus or a recruitment incentive may be utilized, but it is not always promised. Sign-on bonuses are advertised in the posting usually, whereas a recruitment tool, no, I might have said that backwards. Sign-on bonuses are advertised in the posting as a way of attracting the applicants. Recruitment incentives are usually not advertised, but are given to the applicant if they do not agree with the salary that we came back to them with. So usually you can offer them maybe $2,000 if you can't seal the deal with the salary that compensation has come back to. We also have a guide for recruitment and incentives, and it is also on our website. As Lindsay pointed out, if you cannot find it, we will help you as your TAC find the guides that you're looking for. Once an offer is accepted and signed, offer letter is received, all the finalists should be sent and they should be notified that they have not been selected. This is where, once again, we're going to notify everybody that you have not been selected and move forward with your offer letter and your step 2 that will come to us. And we will sign the offer and then you can hire your candidate. Next, Lindsay.
And before we go to the next one, Jean brought up a good question. What are the requirements in a reference check if it's an internal applicant within the department that's posting it? That is the unique time that we don't necessarily need to go through doing a reference check. If the hiring manager is already supervising that individual or has closely worked with that individual that's within that area, that's about the only time that we do not recommend doing reference checks. And honestly, it's just nice to be able to go through and just be able to see that there is confirmation if the department is needing to do that. But if I was doing a search and I had somebody that was internal to me, I wouldn't necessarily need to go through the reference check process because I supervise them. However, if it's somebody coming from a different department that you have not supervised, we do still recommend that you do a reference check on that part. That's a great question, Jean.
That's a good point. Great question. Determining a start date. Most start dates for the company start on the 1st of the month. They will receive their benefits on the next month on the 1st. That's why we kind of recommend them starting at the beginning of the month. Some positions start around the 15th or 16th, but we don't really recommend that. We usually recommend starting around the 1st. Be flexible within reason, of course, of their start date. A lot of applicants have to give a 2-week notice if they're employed somewhere else, and they have to tie up loose ends at other companies they might work at. So just give them time to do that when considering their start date. Please make sure there is a supervisor available when the candidate starts. This way it helps their transition on their first date. They're going to need to get emails and system access, and all this can be done if a supervisor is available. As long as someone else on the team is available to help them with training, I think that is okay, but a supervisor should be there initially just to get them going and started. When I first started, I started on the same day as Lindsay, which is kind of funny, but so we both didn't really know anything, but Sean, thank you, stepped up and he helped me and he onboarded me and he was really good at it. So a good team lead also can help with your onboarding process. Benefits are eligible to employees and they should know this with a 0.50 FTE and greater, and they will have coverage, as I said before, starting on the next month of the first of that next month. I think that is all I have. Oh, no, got one more. So a clear, consistent, and well-communicated onboarding process is critical for a positive experience for the new employee. A poor onboarding experience can leave employees feeling confused, uncomfortable, and ill-prepared to begin working. And so once again, just make sure someone is there to give them a warm welcome and make sure that they have the tools they need to start their job and provide access to set up to their systems. And pairing new hires, like I said, with experienced team members is a great way of helping them get acclimated with their team as well. And that is all I have for after the search. Lindsay, there's a poll exercise.
There is a poll exercise. So I'm going to launch the poll. Hopefully you all get to see this. Does everybody get that polling question on theirs? Okay, we're gonna give everybody a couple minutes to respond to the polling question and then we'll share the results. But we're really wanting to know which aspect of candidate care do you think needs the most improvement during the current process? Give it a little bit more. I see. It's funny, I can see them shifting. It's like little race horses or they're going back and forth on it. I'll share it here in a second. Okay, it looks like a majority of you who responded. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and we're going to share the results. So can you all see the results? Can you see the results? Okay, it looks like post-interview follow-up. It seems like that is the most common one that people feel like could use the most candidate care. I think that's a great area of opportunity that people can work on if they're thinking about the post-interview follow-up. Initial communication looks like it's very close between onboarding support and initial communication. Interview scheduling is last, but honestly, those are some good places to start at. Really thinking about that post-interview follow-up is a great way to move that forward. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare that. Thanks for taking the poll. I have one last chat exercise on here. So I want to take us back to what I was talking about earlier. What do you want to do with this information about candidate care? How will you help create a positive candidate experience based off what you've learned today, or maybe some things that you've learned in other places? What do you want to do to help influence and create that positive candidate experience? We'll read through some of those. It's like communication's coming up. What are some other items? Follow up. That's a great one. Being able to follow up, transparency. be honest in my description of the department, the position. I feel like that's a great place to be at, just an honest description of what it is. I know sometimes we'll be thinking about it as like what we aspire to be, what's aspirational, but it's like, what's the current state? Like, what do we have right now? And what does that look like? Cut people loose as soon as we know we're not going to hire them. I think that's a great first step. Being able to, we want to encourage people to disposition throughout the process. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through a hiring process where hiring manager comes to me and they're like, we have our top 5 people. They applied like 3 months ago. I was like, I'm going to guarantee those top 5 people are probably still not there. And that is normally the case. They are not still there. So sometimes being able to go through that quicker makes it to where you're able to hire those individuals you're really looking at. The next one we had in here, let's see, build up our process so people feel energized about joining the community, make them feel valued, about providing with specifics so they know what to expect. I love that, Oscar. That's a great one. Educate leadership on this. Stick to the hard deadlines or anticipate timelines as much as possible. Flexibility with interview scheduling within reason. Yes, there are times that it does not make sense. I have literally had somebody that said, well, I'm going to be on vacation the next month. If you want to just hold that process, and it's like, that's a position we cannot do that for. And so just trying to as much as accommodate, but sometimes we can't accommodate everything. On here, Sheldon says, I would definitely work with the hiring manager to understand the timelines, to set clear timelines for candidates moving through the process. I know for me, when I was running the internal executive search firm with my previous university, I sent out calendar blocks whenever I knew. I was like, we would establish in the charge meeting, this is the time frame that we're going to be doing these interviews, and we would put calendar blocks on there. It was nice because then it's like, well, we sent you a calendar invite. We need you to be able to attend these ones. And it just made it a little bit easier for people to know when they needed to be available. Says, I'm going to draw up a few ideas on how to change the team's internal processes, standards, and job posting with a focus on improving communication, decreasing candidate pileup, set interview blocks prior to selecting applicants. Love that. I will say there's one on here that said educate leadership on this. So this training that you all are going through is a new training that we recently developed to go with the staff hiring guide that's going to be coming out soon. We are actually going to partner with the learning development team to offer this training a couple times a year so we can have hiring managers. We're going to target it towards hiring managers and then potentially new HR business partners that maybe want to learn about some of these practices. So as that gets released, I'll certainly share that with all of you because you probably have hiring managers that could benefit from doing this training. So just know more to come on that because that's typically the feedback I get is that sometimes with HR business partners, you only have so much influence on the process. So we're trying to get some of the hiring managers skilled up on this as well. And if you have ideas on that, let me know. I'm trying to get in front of that group. But with that, that's the end of our formal piece of it. Are there questions? I will share my screen, but are there any questions that you all have or things that you wanted to talk through?
Or any horror stories you want to share with us from your past experience, or great stories that were good when you interviewed somewhere?
If you want to come off mute and ask your question, that's fine.
Yes. And if you don't have questions, I will say that we definitely have a full team that is always happy to help out with questions that you might have. Talent acquisition consultants are always happy to answer those. But other than that, I think it's always nice to kind of, when you get to one of these trainings, think about 1 or 2 things that you want to take with you. So hopefully you all got some 1 or 2 things to think about. Maybe bring that information back to some of your hiring managers, department heads to really think through. And just know we're hoping to have this out for more resources to get them educated on these things in the future. But thank you all for your time and energy. We appreciate getting to see you all. And if there's other things that would be helpful for us to put a training together on, let us know. Happy to help educate and figure out ways that we can help out the whole group. Thank you all.
Thanks, Lindsay. And
Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, TAC team. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.